Hey, what's up guys? Nick the Informative Fisherman here. I know there's a million skipping videos that exist out there on YouTube right now, Facebook, all these social media platforms, but I always see so many different key things that are missing, and a lot of people know me for my ability to skip. It's what I almost do every morning. I'll go around on a private lake that I live on right here. I skip docks. I do it on the Delta. People see me doing it, and it's a fascinating thing, and there's a lot of different types of skips. So today what I want to give you is essentially a master class in skipping right here. I'm going to give it to you very raw right now. I'm not going to do the super high production. I'm just out here on my back boat. I'm going to tell you about my little setup right off the bat. This is a Stix surface stick right here. This is stixfishing.com, stixfishing.com. This is a rod I designed to fish a ton of top water. You guys all know me for my skipping. This is a phenomenal skipping setup. Now it's a 7'4" fast action, and it's a medium heavy, kind of leaning a little bit more to the heavy side of things, but it's good. It's still really light. You don't want a super meaty stick in your hand when you're skipping. You're doing a lot of fast rotations of the handle. You don't want a big heavy rod wearing you out. So the surface stick, this is the Stix number 5, is phenomenal for that. Now I'm typically using braid anytime I'm skipping a frog. If I'm skipping a jig, if the water's really dirty, kind of like it is out of my house right now today, I may use braid with a jig, but I'm typically gonna use 20-pound fluorocarbon. There's 3 things that I primarily skip. That's a jig, that's a frog, and it's a fluke. The reason for it, the frog serves as a topwater under there. If it's finicky and they want something twitching over their head, they just don't want to eat or analyze what's in front of them, the frog works great for skipping in and around heavy cover and under boat docks. The jig, if the water's colder or they just don't want to commit to top water, but a lot of the time a fluke you can skip back under a dock and twitch and it'll stop and it'll score that reaction strike. That's why they call it a soft jerkbait. So those are the setups I like to throw. The fluke is typically going to be on that fluorocarbon or braid. Once again, it's the same thing. If the water's clear, I'm going to do it on fluorocarbon. The only time I'm going to go straight braid all the way is the frog. The basis for the 65-pound braid: screws, nails, slivers from the wood, cutting the seam, boat docks, ropes, cables. 65 is great. It can handle some abrasion. It can get some frays in it. You can still boat that fish. I've pulled in bass over the top of docks multiple times, over the top of cables, strictly because it's 65. It has nothing to do with the size of the fish, has everything to do with line management as well. Now also, if you do happen to get a backlash when skipping, I don't care who you are, I've drilled 1,000 docks in my lifetime skipping. This is what happens. Somehow you may get an eat on the way in, you may clip something that you didn't think, and you'll get a bird's nest. 65 is 15-pound diameter. It's like 15-pound diameter fluoro or mono, whatever you want to call it, but it's 65-pound strength. So it's easier to get to with your fingers or a line pick and pick out, and it's less likely to break off. So if you hit them with everything you have, if you skip under a dock, the second they grab it, you have to hit them and move them out. You can't do that 1/1000 trick, no. The second, boom, you gotta hit them, you gotta get their head forward and get them out the same direction that frog went, through those trees or under that dock. So it's an immediate hook set, so the 65 is what I choose. That's P-Line X braid. The reel, I have no affiliation, is Shimano. This is a Corrado K XG. It's an 8-3-1. I do suggest nothing slower than 8 speed. You need to be able to get your line up fast and get it back there. You need to be able to get tight the second they blow up on it, and I'm going to explain that in a second here too. But let's talk about a few skips. All right guys, so there's cast skips and there's slide skips. When you're watching one of my videos and you're like, whoa, that looked crazy cool, that was a slide skip. That is when that bait is literally sliding multiple times across the surface. Just tons of little skips under there. All right, and you're like, whoa, that's really cool. There's a time and a place for the slide skip, and there's a time and a place for the cast skip. Let's say it's way out there and I need to cast, thump, and I skip 1 or 2 times under a tree or something. It was far away. Slide skipping far away is difficult to do. The cast skip, if it's a little bit windy or a little bit choppy and you have a tree or a dock, you may need to make that cast skip. That's when you throw out there, and it goes under 1 or 2 skips, all right? That's nice if there's a little chop on the water, But if it's slick calm, you really need to know how to slide skip. And a slide skip's that multiple little skips that go way up under there, and it looks really natural and subtle, like it's something fleeing across the surface. So the slide skip and the cast skip, that slide is that multiple, looks very real, will trigger fish oftentimes even on open water. All right, you see a fish, you're sight fishing, you can slide skip to them, whereas a cast skip is a much more aggressive entry, which I think is why you can get away with it on windier days, because a slide skip doesn't travel across waves as well as a cast skip going right up to the target and going through. Slick calm, you need to be able to slide skip. A little bit of chop on the water, you need to be able to cast skip. That's that 1, 2, under, or 1 and under versus the slide, going all the way through. Now there's backhands of each, and then there's pitch skips of each. So this is where you're gonna start coming into like the complicated stuff, and I'm gonna show you how, but right off the bat, I wanna show you how to get your setup tuned for this. Skipping is, it's a critical thing that you have your spool tension set just right and your brakes. So I'm not gonna tell you to shut your brakes off all the way. There's a lot of guys that say shut your brakes off all the way. Yes, can I skip with shutting my brakes off all the way? I absolutely can, but what I'm gonna tell you is if it's a dial, a 1 through 10, set it at like a 1 or a 2, all right? So real low. Now, if it's like a Corrado, like I'm using right here, which you have the pop-out style brakes, just have 1 on. Now, with your spool tension tight, so I'm gonna go tight, and then I'm gonna back off, all right? So as soon as you see my frog start to fall, I want my frog to fall slightly slower than a free fall. So now remember, braid's grabby, so even though you click your spool, you may want to pull it off with your fingers a little bit to get it started, like that, because your spool tension's not going to be super sensitive with braid, because braid has texture on the other line of your spool. So slide it with your finger to adjust your spool tension. You can see that's a little bit slower than a free fall right there. It's not plopping right down to the water. What that's going to allow my frog to do, or my jig, or my fluke, is have momentum as it's hitting the water. It doesn't have resistance against it. So now we got our spool tension set just right. We got a light amount of brakes. Now let's think about our mechanics to the cast. This, when you see people go sidearm, a straight line cast is a mistake. A skip can never be casted like this. And if you did skip casting like this, you were fortunate that you didn't get a backlash. And the reason why, if you make that sidearm like that, that's a mistake. But notice the difference. That's a mistake. That is correct. That's a mistake. That is correct. Now, pay attention. I'm going to make a mistake on the first cast, and you tell me what I did wrong. All right? That is a mistake, and granted, even if I hit the surface, let's see if I get a backlash. It's really hard for me because my brain's trained. Ooh, I did not like that. It skipped 1 time. That was a mistake. Now see if you can notice the difference right here. What is the difference? Notice the position of my rod is up. It's the mechanics of your cast. How your rod travels when you skip is like this. That is the position of your rod. Downward momentum, upward momentum. And what that is it's lifting your line off the water. You ever heard of a mend? Pay attention to this. My line's in the water, now my line's out of the water. What has more resistance on this frog? This or this? Exactly. Line in the water. Now the frog is physically having to drag my line. That is going to slow my skip down tremendously. So if I keep it down low, it's so weird. Psychologically, I can't even do it. But I want you to see that just a normal sidearm cast is a mistake versus lifting up. You see that? Now my line's in the water. But that was a slow backhand skip. And it still traveled, I don't know, 35, 40 foot out there. And that was because my line was up. So when you go out and you practice your skip, I want you to start like this. Feel that frog, okay? It should always be in a circular rotation. You're gonna see a lot of skipping videos where guys got comfortable skipping with a lot of line out like this, I'm not gonna suggest that at all. I'm gonna suggest being within about 6 inches of your rod tip and finish with your rod up. Look at that. See, I even hit the water right here in front of the boat and it still went out there, strictly because the mechanics were so good and my line was mended into the air, so my frog continued to travel forward. So I'm not going to skip. I'm going to make a cast in midair, but I'm going to use the same mechanics of my cast as I would skipping. So midair, up. See my rod right there? All I did was bring it down and bring it up. Now, practice that. Feel the momentum. Go out in your front yard. If you have a swimming pool, you can practice. I do not want you to even focus on hitting the water. I want you to focus on casting it a foot off the surface and finish with your rod up. First thing that you need to have is feeling that. Practice getting comfortable with that. Once you make about 10 casts like that, now I want you to practice feeling your thumb lightly against the spool, feathering your thumb against the spool the whole time. So basically, feathering means never removing your thumb from the spool, but imagine that you're using your thumb to put the lightest amount of pressure you possibly can on that spool the whole time. And all that's doing is basically serving as a brake to where if you go to hit something, you'll immediately stop. And another nice benefit of that is when a fish grabs it right under the dock, you're gonna hear that boom, and instinctually, you're gonna lock your thumb down even before you click over. So you're gonna see along this video, when I skip under, okay, boom, and they hit it, you'll see me do this and pull that fish forward, then click over and horse them out. And all I was doing was instantaneously keeping that fish's momentum going forward to get them out from under that dock by thumbing the spool. I never even engaged my reel. If my thumb was off of there, boom, instant backlash. So let's talk a little bit about line management right here. Very, very critical factor when out skipping. If you just spooled up with braid, chances are it's not ready to be skipped with. I know, oh, braid companies don't want to hear this. Your braid needs to be broke in, just like a baseball glove. The first time you get it when you're a little kid, you pack that hard ball in there, you wrap it with rubber bands, you get out there, you work that glove. That is very critical for braid. Braid has a coating, all right? When it's brand new, your coating is nice and fresh. It's being squeezed down, it's being compressed. So I have like a 1-day rule on braid. So if you're throwing like a spook or a buzzbait, after it's broke in for 1 day, it's typically ready to be skipped. Now, before you ever start skipping in that day, never cold skip. Now, I'm guilty of this. Cold skipping is what you don't want to do. So the first prep that you're going to do, once you get your tune and everything right, you're going to make a long cast. All right? You're going to make a long cast. You're going to go to your very first guide. I dip it, okay? Boop. And I'm lubricating, and I keep my rod tip under the water, and I reel fast. So I'm getting all that line I'm working with on my spool, nice and tight, nice and lubricated. So everything's wet here, it's lubricated here. I am good to go. Now, every time I work through a dock, like look at this dock right here. So if I was to work down this dock and I skip everything, as you're skipping, you'll occasionally get loose line in there, okay? You get a little loose line in your spool. If you notice any loose line in your spool, if like you notice a little light spot in there, a little bit of a loop, like you can see right here, I just did that skip. There's a little bit right in there. Typically, if you have a little loose line right in there and you go to hook a fish under a dock and you wrench them, sometimes that's when your braid will duck back into the spool. So if you get a little loose line, turn out, make that cast, again, put your rod tip under the water and get that line tight again. Management of your line is critical when you are skipping. Have a 1-day rule on your braid. Make sure it's semi-broken in. Even if you're not gonna listen to that, make sure you get at least more line than you intentionally plan on skipping. Put your rod tip under the water, lubricate your guides, and get it in fast. Another thing you can do, if you're just beginning to skip, and you're watching this right now, make a long cast, pull out an additional 10 to 20 feet, like this, okay? And go on your spool and wrap it with electrical tape 3 times, and then reel your braid in on top of that electrical tape. And what that's gonna do is if you do happen to get a backlash, it's not gonna go into the bottom of your spool. It's gonna be near the top. It's gonna allow you to pick that out a little bit more frequently, and you're gonna get that spool to last a little bit longer to get you through that learning curve. Once you're experienced, you don't really need that. When you're getting going, you may really wanna try that because it could save you on some line. Braid can be expensive. All right, guys, so we're pulling up to this dock right here. I'm probably about 40 foot off the dock. I wanna evaluate my target. Look at the shade line, sun's straight overhead right now. This is why it's dark right here on my face, but I'm keeping it real for you. The roll slide skip, typically if you're really experienced, 35, 40 foot off's pretty good. Coming in like that through there. I can come in through that right-hand side. So you can see, you wanna pick your target apart. So I got roll skip in there, roll slide skip, the far right, and then I got the backhand coming through that angle on that side. Now, here's what you wanna think about. Are you gonna pick apart the front of the dock first, or you're gonna go for the meat and potatoes first? You have to evaluate your target. Just skipping is just skipping, okay? Look at this dock. It's probably, I don't know, 12 to 15 foot long. There could be a fish here, there could be a fish here. So if I go under and I'm in the back of the dock and I hook a fish off the back of this dock and wrench them through, I'm gonna spook everything else I have. And if I'm in a tournament or even trying to show out for my buddies, I definitely want to catch as many as possible. You pull into a cove that only has, you know, 1 or 2 primo looking docks on it, the last thing you want to do is go for the meat and potatoes immediately. If you got a cove that's maybe got 100 docks, yeah, go for the meat and potatoes every single time. I just seen a big turtle lift up under my frog, almost freaked out and swung. So there's the roll skip. Okay, that was off my right hand side. That's that roll cast. And I'm in the meat and potatoes. And you can see I'm there. But the backhand skip, I could probably roll cast skip in here too. And I'm going to show you the backhand, the mechanics for that. But then let's say we accidentally got up a little too close. And we're being quiet and stealthy on the trolling motor. Now a roll skip or a backhand skip can be way too aggressive. This is where the pitch skips come into handy. And that's a little higher up on the reel, and you're coming in kind of at an angle right here. So I'm gonna show you. So the pitch skip going under a little bit more quietly. So the pitch skip is coming under and I'm back under there. Much more quiet, subtle entry. Now, the pitch skip, I will tell you right now, is the most difficult cast for skipping. And I'm gonna tell you why, is because what you just looked at is not the way I'm doing it. So what you're thinking I'm doing for a pitch skip is just going straight down and straight up. Yep, like that. Is that possible? Yes, but that's not actually how it works. A pitch skip, I'm up here and I'm actually coming around with the rod, then doing that. So it's around and up. So that's a very difficult one to do, but it's the same mechanics, around and then up with the rod, okay? So I'm coming around and up with the rod. You see, even right there, going slow just to show you guys, around and up. It's the same mechanics, but I have to finish with my rod up. Same thing. And I'm trying to do it slow, but you definitely want to do it fast. And getting speed from this position is very difficult to do. Getting speed from a side position where you come up like that is much easier. So just look at the mechanics, and I encourage you to go try this, whether you're out on the lake, river, swimming pool, front yard, is try from this position, see how far your frog can get, and then try from a little sidearm and under. See the big difference right there? It's way easier to create momentum with that. But that pitch skip is really good for up close, quiet days. You end up getting too close to your target. That's one you want to be able to utilize, guys. So practice that, and you're gonna become much more of an effective skipper doing that. So let's get into the backhand. So opposed to the roll cast, you see my hand on the back of here, coming up, okay? Momentum going up like that with the rod. Now the backhand is entirely different. So the backhand is what you really want to practice a lot. And believe it or not, I find the backhand skip to be easier than a roll cast skip. So this is a position, if you look, okay, I'm right here, I'm the same. I have 2 fingers in front of the trigger grip right here on my surface stick, and I'm doing the same thing. Well, right here, the backhand, I'm doing the identical move, all right? But I have one hand off. And this is where you're gonna practice your 1990s pimp slap. That movement right there, that's it. And it's not back, it's not forward, it's a rotation. And I'm coming up, rotation coming up. Same thing, rotation coming up in the air. That's the identical mechanics right there. So if you look at me doing this, you see me coming down the bank, I make a long cast or I just started, and you see me doing that with my rod up. If I'm pitching to the bank, that's a horrible position to be in. But if I'm skipping, it's the correct position, so I'm getting warmed up. And I'll show you now, I have my backhand skip. There you go. See, touchdown a couple times. That was the skip cast. Now you can see we have a little bit of ripple coming on the water right here. I'll go for the slide, but you could see that only won about 5 or 6 times just because of this amount of ripple right here. So the slide cast is deadly effective on the calm days. Cast skip on the ripple. But I can go find protected water and hunt that good stuff out. All right, guys, take a look at this target right here in front of me. There's a pontoon boat lined up with this dock. So all the prime real estate is under there. There are a lot of obstacles. This is where it's very easy to run into stuff. Oh, I got him. Yep, I got him. Yep, I got him. Speak of the devil. So that roll cast that I happened to hit perfect right there. You can see I happened to hit it perfectly. Now you can look right here. I got him in the tongue, okay, which means I still had a little bit of slack in my line when I hit him. So when I say that about taking the 2 turns of the handle, let me get that hook out of there. So what happens is, if your frog's working back and forth like this, okay, it's working. Remember, a frog's the only lure you pretty much work on slack line. You're walking the dog, so the frog's turning like this the whole time. So let's say the bass eats it like this, and you set the hook with slack line. That frog literally has to rotate out the front of his mouth. So when you hit him, now that frog is rotating before the hooks hit him. So in this case, he actually came up from the bottom and the frog rolled over, and I got him in the tongue like that. If I would have got tighter, it probably would have turned the frog and I would have got him in the roof of the mouth. So a lot of the time when you see one hook into that bass, what that typically means is you didn't get all the slack out before you set the hook and you got lucky. A lot of the time when you're reeling them in, you see them pop off, happens to me all the time. Little too much slack. You got one hook in them. As you got tight, that one hook started to force itself out and the other hook kind of pinned it out. So sometimes 2 hooks can work against you if you have slack in the line. If you get your slack out and hit them, 2 hooks works to your benefit. So this is where a lot of the time where people fish like horny toads and stuff and reel them with a single EWG, they're like, man, I never lose them once I hook them. And just the opposite. How come with like a hollow body, when I hook them, I lose them? And that's typically because you have too much slack in your line. You ever heard the term dead sticking? I'm sure you have if you're into bass fishing. Dead sticking means as soon as your bait lands, letting it sit for a second. So a lot of the time when I'm skipping and I'm back into the meat and potatoes, the first second I hit, I twitch it 1 time just to let them know it's real. Then I dead stick, especially with a frog, a jig, the fluke, basically the 3 most common things for skipping. Once you get it back into your target is to hit it once, but then let it sit, all right? So we can see we have 3 cavities right here. So that's the first one. So I want to go for the middle one now. And this is all roll slide skips. So I'm back here. I'm gonna tap it once or twice right there, get it in the zone that I'm comfortable with. And now I want a dead stick. Soaking on a dock, especially if it's something that's kind of isolated, spending a lot of time under, especially if you make a really good cast, soaking in that spot can be crazy critical. A frog is just one of those baits that just sitting there for a long period of time, just like a popper, just sitting there. I've had fish come up, eat it 15, 20 seconds after it was sitting there. And I think they were right there the whole time, just looking cross-eyed at the thing. Next thing you know, pow, then they swung on it. But you got to remember, if you make a perfectly good skip, you're under there, spend some time under there, especially if the water's dirty. If it's clear, you may want to soak for a little bit, but in those dirty pockets, sometimes you may just want to see if they're a little incorrigible and spend some time under there. Let's go for that third bit of it and see if anybody's home under this side. Now, your angle on this too can be very critical. You can see that I'm straight out, all right, and the sun angle's coming down like this. And I went in 2 times on it like this, and the target that I just caught a fish off lined up on it like that. So essentially each one of these pockets is in the same position. But if I want to come down, go through the end of it and come through, a lot of the times that'll trigger the fish, especially when they're under docks and stuff. Oftentimes I think that, you know, they're against a piling, against a post with their head, and it just wasn't in the right position. You can see we don't have wind right here. Bass are typically looking into the wind. Sometimes you can score reactions on them coming from behind, but typically if they're in the feeding mood, you want to bring it towards their face. So remember this, a lot of the time, if you're skipping and it's an isolated target, you don't have a lot, try it from multiple angles. I'm going to go over here, come back through this way. I'm going to go up here and come back through it that way. And so many big fish I've triggered after the 5th or 6th cast into there, just changing up the angle. I say, why? I don't know. I'm going to listen to the fish. I'm not going to force my idea on them. All right, guys. Now, one of the more common mistakes I see when people are just getting into skipping is they do this. Like they lean over and like they're trying to aim down. Like you're trying, and the problem is, I think it's, we all skipped a rock. You know, we all went to the river or pond with our dad. My dad's behind the camera here. And we lean over and we skip that rock. And I think it's in our head. But you got to remember, you know, we have a 7-foot rod attached to us right here. So if you notice when I skip, I'm not leaning down. I'm not leaning down at all. I'm not aiming down at all. I'm basically casting to my target. Did you see me aim down at all? I don't aim down. I'm just doing that perfect rotation of the mechanics I was telling you about. And natural gravity is bringing my frog down to where practice casting just like that to your target and then just get a little bit lower to the water. And then you'll see that your skip will go. But make sure you do not have in your head that you need to lean over and somehow that you need to aim down. That is a huge mistake. If you're thinking you need to aim down, get it out of your head. If you think you're going back, think you're going forward, get it out of your head. It's strictly a rotation. As you finish, your rod's coming up. All right, guys, so as I'm approaching this dock right here, you can see the sun's almost straight up overhead, but you can see the big trees casting a shade line right here. So working a frog in open water is not necessarily the most effective thing. Unless that's all you got tied on, then go ahead. But I want you to pay attention to this dock right here. So I can only see just under 2 foot. And I typically have a ×3 rule in regards to all the bass fishing. That's how far I can see down. I times that strike zone by 3. So 2 times 3, I'm looking at 6 foot. So now what I want to look at right here is this dock. All right, probably another 12-foot wide dock, goes about 10 foot back. So now I want to divide this dock into 2 pieces. So this is where I do want to approach it a little bit differently. So I don't want to kind of go beyond where I think I would drag another fish out. So I'm going to start with a backhand skip on this side of the dock. And because I can't see it, I have to listen very closely. Listening for any sort of movements, any sort of eats. Now, this is not where you feel for the fish. Anytime you hear it, boom, splash, anything, you have to reel down, point your rod at them, get tight and swing. Doom, as soon as you hear it, take 2 full rotations of the reel, point the rod at it and swing. Do not wait to feel the fish start cranking, okay? What's gonna happen is if you allow that fish to turn and get behind a piling, he's stuck, especially if it's wood. If it's a wood beam down there, you're gonna be stuck. You're not getting that fish out. You're losing a frog. You went from hero to zero in a hurry, and I would rather you go from zero to hero in a hurry. So I first started off with that backhand. Now I'm gonna go roll, cast, skip to the other side. Now you can see it coming out there. Typically, I'm going to work my frog probably to about a foot outside the shade line. If it's clear water, you got to remember that strike zone is going to be bigger. If it's real clear water, you may have to go for the meat and potatoes right away. Now, as I get closer, what's critical is that I'm not loud. I'm not talking loud like this, and I'm not all over the trolling motor. My buddy's not stepping all over the boat. Let's say the wind happens to blow us in. Now we're getting close. Now we're in that pitch skip position. And I pitched under there. Much more quiet entry, subtle. I may need to get a third cast in there. I may have missed him on a backhand or a roll cast skip, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, I was moving fast on the trolling motor. The boat's there. I don't want to touch the trolling motor. I need to make that pitch skip. And I know this may seem very complicated to a lot of you guys watching this, but I promise you, you know, if you're still getting frog fish in an area, if it's still warm where you live, if that water's over 60 degrees and you have shallow forage, probably bluegills or whatever it is that you have shallow, golden shiners, birds, you name it, frogs. There's gonna be bass up shallow willing to take a shot at a frog or a jig or a fluke that you skip up under that dock. And the mechanics are all the same, whether you're using braid, whether you're using fluorocarbon, guys, get out there and try it. You'll get so comfortable doing this, and I have fished directly behind some experienced guys, very, very experienced guys, where I go down and I see them frogging, but they just won't push it. They just won't aim. And I will tell you what, if there's a gap in a dock and I try and I try and I try and I'm hitting the dock, I hit the dock so many times, I'm going again, I just bounce off the dock again, I bounce off the dock again, and there's a gap this big. I've done it to where, my dad right here behind the camera, guys, he knows. What have I hit the dock? At least 10 times on some targets before, and next thing you know, it goes in, and what happens? Boom, a giant smokes it. And they didn't care about all that commotion, because you got to remember this too. A lot of the time, if you're around a boat dock area or a marina, these fish are used to noise. They're used to people walking on top. Don't give up because you bumped the dock 2 or 3 times. That just means it's way harder to get under, and those fish have probably never seen a lure under there. Get under, yank a fatty out. You're going to be absolutely stoked, guys. I'm Nick, the Informative Fisherman. Follow me on all the popular social media channels. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments below this video. I'll try to make it a point to get back to you guys. I am very busy, so just please understand it does take me a little bit to get back sometimes. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.